What's up, beautiful people? This is Christian from the Successful Spiritualpreneur podcast, and today I'm very excited to have Roger Burnley on the show. He's a spiritual teacher, a life coach, and a channel for Wilhelm, a collective intelligence that he has received messages from for over 36 years. Through his channeling, Roger developed Your Last Development Program, a verified system of personal transformation that helps individuals achieve alignment, purpose, and self-acceptance. His mission is simple but profound: to help humanity evolve by showing each person that their best life begins with one realization. You were never broken, and you were always becoming who we're meant to be. Welcome to the show, Roger.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here, Christian.
I know, such a pleasure. So tell us a little bit about Wilhelm. A lot of people might not be familiar with, who Wilhelm is. So tell us a little bit about your experience with channeling and Wilhelm and all things coming through you.
A lot of people would not have been familiar with Wilhelm because I spent many years hiding Wilhelm. I started in 1989 by automatic writing. I had been doing meditation and all, things like that for a while, but I read about automatic writing. I never really thought much about it, but I needed help. When we were looking for some sort of guidance, and I said, okay, let me try this because somebody else said it worked. And for a few days, nothing happened. And then all of a sudden, I made this connection. And I knew that, and it was bizarre because it frightened me a little bit. I said, who's speaking to me? And it says, well, this is another part of you. It's your higher self. But if that makes you uncomfortable, you can call us whatever you like. And I said, Wilhelm. Had no awareness of why I would have said that name because I'm not German. I didn't know why that was coming through. But then it kept being revealed to me over the years. Then I continued writing every day. I just didn't know why, and I was saving all the papers, but I was getting information. I was getting things that were really helping me to understand things. And then I started using it in my business. I wasn't telling people that though, because I was a vocal coach then. That's what I was doing. I'd been doing that. I've been a vocal coach for like 36, 35 years or something like that. But at that time, I was just developing everything. And so there was one aspect they gave me about performance, for instance. And I said, oh, this is really brilliant because I was still performing. But then I turned that into a course. I didn't tell people that's what I was doing because I got the information from the information I received from Wilhelm about not being so focused on myself, caring about the audience, connecting. I said, oh, so then I made a course out of that called Performance Made Simple, breaking it down for everybody else, for my clients to know how to perform. So that went on for years. But then in 2008, I had another office and people started finding the messages because I hadn't published anything at that time because I thought people aren't going to get this, doesn't make any sense. And people picked up the messages and said, wow, this is really helping me. Where did it come from? And I said, oh, well, it came through me, and I'm still holding back. But they said, would you send them to me? I said, okay, yeah, I do it every day. So I created a little email list, a group chat, so to speak, because on AOL, because at that time that's all we had. This was 2008, and but that was it. And I didn't even create a website. Somebody else said you should put these up, put them on a website. I said, okay, I'll do that. Um, I didn't do that. I said somebody else did it because I wasn't going to go about doing it. I'm focusing on my singing business. That's all I thought I was doing. So that went on for the longest time. Then I thought, this is really uncomfortable and I have to start talking about it. But I couldn't because it wasn't going to make sense to people. So in 2019, I wrote a book called Overcoming Fear, A Guide to Freedom, because I had suffered through so much fear throughout my entire life, and I knew that I had received the ways of moving beyond it through Wilhelm, through everything I was receiving. And so in the book, it's quite funny when people read it. I tell them I really wanted to write this book, but I had one problem: fear, because I didn't want to be judged for how I'm going to tell them how I received this information. But it was my reality. It's exactly what happened. And so I would put in there little techniques, little things that they gave me that worked. And so that was it. So after that, that was in 2019. Then, Christian, in 2020, the world changed. Not because of the, well, it was because due to the pandemic, which most people thought that I was getting something else. Wilhelm says, well, now you're going through a restructuring of your world. I go, what? And I go, no, this felt uncomfortable. I said, I don't want to talk about this. And then I would hesitate because they would give me all the information. And I said, I can't say this. And they would point it out. They said, we gave Roger all this information and then we sat here forever just before he would write it. And then they started showing me that they had given me this. And then in 2021, so that was 2020, I'm receiving all these messages. The messages that I received in 2020 have manifested in our world right now. They told us exactly what would be happening because there were energetic changes that were happening, energetic shifts. We all move through them individually in our journeys and our ascension journey and our actualization, but the world does the same thing, and we are the world. We're the ones who are doing it. So naturally, we would need to be restructured as well, meaning looking at ourselves and going through that ascension process or self-actualization. And they said, well, it's going to be a little uncomfortable for you because so many of you don't want to go into the unknown of who you are, the unknown of yourselves. And so when you put billions of people together who are not wanting to do that, you could have a little chaos. And so they kept explaining it all. Then, Christian, it got even different. They said, we want you to understand that we have given you everything that could change your life in the world. And so the only problem will be you probably won't believe it. They said, but if you meet someone, we have given you a message for them on their birthday in 2012. They said, because we want you to understand the energetic connection that every soul has when they come onto the planet. It just unfolds at a particular time, and that's an energetic alignment that they have. And they said, most of you think you don't have a divine plan. Yes, you do, and we're showing it to you. And the more of you who can go in that direction, then things would change in your world. Because they kept saying, you're going to look at your world and think, well, what happened? Well, you didn't own yourself, that's all. Because that is the process of all of humankind basically coming to a greater awareness of who they are. So then they told me, now you've got to start talking. I said, I'm not going to do that because I hadn't been channeling. I had only been writing all of those years, just doing the writing. And so then they said, nope, you must start channeling. Christian, I sat on the set when I heard that. I sat on the side of my bed and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. That's going to be too embarrassing. It's going to be too confronting. I don't want people to blame me, to judge me. I'd watched other people channeling, I've seen all of that. I watched Jane Roberts even. I thought, I'm not going to be that person. Then I felt stuck on the side of my bed. They said, well, we have too much to say, so you have to start talking. So then I began. And then it shocked me because more and more information, when I started doing it, more and more information came through. Then they revealed to me that they had given me a quantum philosophy that would change the world. I go, what? And they started showing the cycles. They used 17 years, starting from 2008. And then they said, if you look at your world, you can see there were certain conditions that were occurring in 2008 that you're in the same place, repeating now. And then they would give me little messages that would help us remember, because we're always repeating things in history, in our civilization, in our consciousness, but we never put together necessarily how the energies of our world are affecting that. And that's why we have these patterns. The patterns repeat in us and also in the world. So they began showing them to me. Then I couldn't figure out why I was having so much physical healing, mind-body connection, all of these things that were happening all these years. Now, I turned 75 a week ago. And everything that was happening, all the physical things had changed. And they said, well, that's because it was alignment. Then they started showing me all the information they had been giving me was energetically aligned with the planets changing, the conjunctions and all kinds of things. And I had no awareness of that because I never studied astrology or astronomy or science, nothing. But they said, this is, and today, this is so funny that we're doing this. There's a message on there today for, because whenever this is going to be out, but anyway, it's for the 12th of November. They said, I put a string of messages, and they said, yeah, this is how the pyramids were built also. Things that we can't believe, that we're still trying to figure out, but it's always occurring in our consciousness. And what we're meant to do is always elevate our consciousness. That's the reason we're alive, each person. And so, but accepting that was challenging. And we all have doubt. And I had tons of it. And today, that's exactly what they said. You didn't believe us or yourselves. That is the message that was on the site today. Or, well, actually, they gave us that last year on this date because we catch up. That's how we grow. We grow in our awareness over time. We will get information, try to accept it or reject it, and then implement it and use it in our lives. Well, the entire world does that. But it just depends on how many of us are going to decide to move to a higher state. Yeah.
Mm,
And that's what went on.
beautiful. Yeah, I love that. The collective awakening individually.
Yes, that's exact, and that's what they had me write the other day. I sat down the other day and they said, just go. Now we have AI, we have artificial intelligence. They said, put our messages in there and have it analyzed. And they analyzed it and said, this is an evolutionary path for individuals and collective because they're the same. We have just separated them in our minds because of our where we came from, our our generational beliefs, where countries, whatever it was. They said,
Mm.
we want you to think about it as being a soul. What if you just thought of every person that's coming into the world that was a soul and they had worth and value? Wouldn't that make a difference? And I go, yeah, that would make sense.
Mm. Yeah, that's beautiful. So, from your perspective, 2025, which
hmm
is 17 years after 2008,
hmm
what are we like? Where are we right now? Like, what are we going into? Are we at the beginning of something, at the end of something?
We're at the
I'm
big.
sure it probably always, I mean, everything's always happening at the same time, right? But like, is it like the beginning of this and the end of that? Like, what can you speak?
That's pretty much it. It's the okay. Let's go back to 2012 because I wasn't paying attention to that when they told me about these messages. And then they started showing me you go through evolutionary cycles. But they said in 2012, that's when many of you thought the world was going to end. And people were getting rid of things because the Mayan calendar had ended. And so on December 21st of 2012, people thought, well, we're done. The world is ending. And Wilhelm gave us a message that said, wait. It was just that was the title of the message, wait. And I go, what does that mean? I said, the world wasn't ending, you're building a new one. And that's going to come through each of you. And so then we took all of those years, these 17 years, to come to now. And we're right at the place, at the precipice of what we can do if we decide to step over our fear.
Hmm, I love it. And so, if you take 2012 plus 17, that brings us to 2029,
hmm
right? Um, what does that feel like?
It's
It feels like 2020 was like the beginning of something.
hmm
Like a stone was pushed off like a hill and it
That's
started
exactly
rolling.
yeah,
And then 2025, the thing is still rolling. The stone is rolling, you know?
exactly.
And it feels like 2029, it feels like the stone must be at the maximum speed it gained from that momentum in a way. And
It
it's
all depends on
starting to cool down, rolling in
yeah.
2029.
If if
That's what I'm feeling.
yes, but again, this is the thing that's so fascinating. It depends on what we do. Like the planets are going to keep doing what they're doing. We're going to all be affected by those changes. But the way we react to them individually and then also ultimately collectively will determine how our world turns out, you see? And that's another one of the messages that came through today on this date in 2020. I think it said something like that. Um, what was it? It was like you and your world are evolving. It, I'm sorry, I have to look because now that I'm thinking about it, I just got to see exactly what it
Yeah,
was.
that's fine. That's
And
fine.
it was, and it was because it was so surprising to me um, to see it, and I'm thinking, this doesn't make sense. And now, and looking at the world on this day, I said, this is exactly what they were saying. and because, let me explain this. They wanted us to understand that there are energetic changes that we each move through in our lives and also in the world. And the more that we understand them, we don't get freaked out. And that's what they kept saying. If you had studied your history, you wouldn't be quite as afraid because we would know changes happen, and then we have a responsibility to make the changes what we want them to be rather than thinking we're victims of what is occurring. And so it was, oh, I'm sorry, I'm still wanting to see this title now. Let me see what it was. And it, yep, you you will now live up to more of your potential.
Mm.
And what that meant is we were going to feel the pressure of the day. We were going to see things in the world that would maybe feel a little uncomfortable. And in the United States, we're definitely feeling that. And that's exactly what's happening. But then that's going to cause each person to, in their own way, move to that higher state of understanding of themselves. When we're under that kind of pressure, that's what happens. And that's why I felt pushed to do a bit more as well. It's up to each of us.
Mm. I love that. Yeah, it's really interesting to see what's playing out on a global level right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to talk about concrete topics and what your perspective or yours and Wilhelm's perspective is on, for example, with AI, there's so much demand for energy right
Mm-hmm.
now. And we have all these nuclear programs coming back up, popping back up. Um, and it feels at the same time we're so close to fusion technology,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in a way, like nuclear is the opposite of fusion,
Mm-hmm. Um,
which is very funny because nuclear, you're trying to split the atom, fusion, you're trying to combine it,
mm-hmm.
right? And of course, it feels for me splitting, that's fear, it's separation. It's, like nuclear energy for me has this connotation of like, yeah, there's just something just not 100% kosher. You know what I
And
mean?
that's yes, and that's exactly what they showed us. They showed me that. They said, okay, now look at when we talked about Aquarius, the age of Aquarius. That was a while ago. We thought that was happening then. They said, no, it's now. And this is, but you're going to struggle with that because it's some of you are going to want to come together and have inclusion and acceptance, and others are going to want separation. And you'll do that within yourselves, and then we'll see it play out in the world. And that's exactly what's happening, what you've been observing. That's exactly it. They gave me one message. Well, you may not have remembered this, but here in the US, when the movie Oppenheimer came out, and also Barbie, and then they made this people here they started calling it Barbenheimer, and because people were going to the movies and seeing both films, and the films, after we were coming out of the pandemic and all these different things, there was so much that people weren't going to theaters. So now these two movies made everyone go to the theater again. And then Wilhelm says, but you weren't paying attention to why those movies became so popular. You missed the point. They said, because this was addressing your current conditions in your world, but you're not seeing it necessarily. And so they said one was Barbie was saying that maybe you could change your old ideologies of what people are meant to look like in terms of Barbies and Kens. That's what it was there. And then Oppenheimer was another warning because you did certain things more than 100 years ago where you made great bombs and started blowing up things. And so now you have a different opportunity now to go to a higher state of consciousness where you don't have to keep killing one another. But that depends on how many of you decide to move to a higher state of consciousness within yourself.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting because, when you talk about fusion and nuclear, it's the same concept, right? Again, nuclear is like separation, fusion
Mm-hmm.
is combination of something. It's like, well, would you rather combine things, try
Mm-hmm.
and combine things, harmonize things, or would you rather separate things, right?
They ha- they gave me one message. They said you have done this before and you did well. Okay, this was one of the messages. They are talking about the evolutionary process that we move through, and it looks challenging and difficult. but we keep surviving, depending on how many of us decide to go to that next level of understanding. But it's sometimes challenging, and we will have chaos. And the chaos exists within each of us because we feel comfortable where we were, knowing who we were before. And they said, no, the old you needs to be destroyed as well. Restructuring happens with the destruction of the old you and the acceptance of the new you. And that's what
Mm.
we're each doing. But again, it depends on how many.
Let's talk about acceptance. Every time I study spiritual texts or principles, it seems that acceptance is kind of like the foundation pillar of many of these.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One person that I think embodies uh, acceptance so well is Byron Katie.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and really, she says, uh, if you fight with reality, you lose
Mm-hmm.
because, you're not accepting what is.
Mm-hmm.
So, from your perspective, like from a philosophical perspective, like isn't that all we have to do in life? Like trying to like accept circumstances, or how do we bring our own, I would say, will or direction, trajectory into this?
We have each individual has a soul path that we're each moving through. See, Wilhelm comes from a different standpoint. They said they want us to think of ourselves as being eternal spiritual beings, because in essence we are. Because what we're carrying is consciousness. Consciousness has always existed. Now we will pick it up from our individual places, our ancestors, our countries, wherever we live. But those ideas, no matter where they came from, are always limited. So we have to decide in our individual way if we're going to move through the limitations that have existed within our each path, within our evolutionary path, that causes us to heal, that causes us to come together and know who we are, and then we pass that on to others. Or we choose not to do that, and then we pass on to others the old ideas and the ideologies and the whole bit. And that is the place where we are currently. But we can look at it in two ways that most people are thinking this is really frightening. And I look at it and I go, well, no, I know that we could do something different if we changed our perception. And that's what we're meant to do now. But that's difficult. Even when, and I was talking about this today, I said, you won't believe me. I did this video, said, you won't believe me. Because when we receive information in a different way, it's challenging for people to accept.
Mm,
And this is, and Carl Jung, for instance, said the most challenging thing for most individuals is to look at themselves, is to do shadow work, is to go inside. Except that's the only way that we can evolve. But we become afraid of it. And I became afraid of it, even though I'm receiving stuff that's so helpful. But my old generational pattern said, no, I shouldn't be doing this. This shouldn't have happened. I shouldn't know this. You see? And so
mm,
it's about releasing the programming.
mm. Yeah, I love that. I think there's so much that, is stored in our body and psyche that, we just I'd rather play another lifetime not looking at it than actually
Yes.
looking at it. There's so much stuff if we start looking and really opening some of our, you know, inner childhood wounds, ancestral wounds. Um,
That's exactly it. They started me with this. Okay, you just brought up a process that I use with um, my clients because I had to move through it. They said um, they gave me one exercise called "How to Have a Happy Childhood," and people would look at me and go, "What? No, I'm not going to do that. My childhood was terrible. I was damaged. I hated my parents. I hated my whatever it might have been." Or they come up with all those things. And we said, "Okay, great. Now you'll look at all of that, and now go back and look at it and ask a different question. Why? What did you gain from that? What were you supposed to gain?" And it becomes an entirely different way of looking at it. And so I can look at any situation that I thought was terrible in my childhood and say, oh, now I see that caused me to become something else. There was one message that they gave us, and this is again back in 2020 when they were trying to tell us what we would be moving through, and they said, "Your father is quite proud of you." And people would say, What does that mean? They said, well, you're carrying ancestral ideas. And so you are meant to do more than your parents or grandparents or whoever came before. And so they would say, and your ancestors are watching with curiosity. They want to see what you can do more than what they could have because we have more awareness, we have more knowledge, we have more
Mm.
abilities. And so that's where we are.
Yeah, I love that. I love, how the entire lineage builds on itself.
Yes.
It's very fascinating. Like I could have never do what I do today without the people and what they have done. It's not just about, yeah, we have the internet and the tools and this and that technology, but also because people did this before
Mm-hmm.
or in the previous whatever generations, because
Mm-hmm.
they were acting in this way, or, there's just certain predispositions that are genetic. It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, I grew up in Germany in
Mm-hmm.
a part of a merchant's family.
Mm-hmm.
I studied international business. I started my own business, which was the first was actually a bracelet. So it was jewelry,
Mm-hmm.
something tangible. Because I'm from Germany. I like when things are tangible, not just like in the air or kind of like a promise. I like to deliver people something that I can touch and feel. That didn't take off, so I switched more towards like building websites. So it was now not tangible anymore. It was a website, but it's still pretty like digitally tangible to have a website. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like it was still like something tangible in a digital form. And now, recently, 3 years ago, I started my tea brand. It's called One with Tea,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels like the startup or getting that off the ground was so much easier than the online stuff because I just felt more predisposition, more worthy, more like I've done this before. Like my ancestors have done. Like I'm a merchant's like it's just more part of my identity. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
so much easier for me to bring into the world and make
That
it
was
successful
alignment.
faster.
That was alignment. You were finding that alignment, and that's what we each do at different times in our lives. Every person will do that, and then when we do find that alignment, then you find, oh, things are working much easier now. It's going
Mhm.
because it's there. But sometimes we fight against it, what I did quite a bit, but that was still purposeful. They said, do not judge your experience because we're always learning something, even when we make mistakes and go in the opposite direction. Because I kept going in the opposite direction so many times, and then I
Mhm.
get smacked on the head, so to speak. Literally, I would have accidents, things would happen, and go because we're trying to find direction. And also, and the German connection, which is so fascinating, I have this deep German connection I can't explain. That's why I picked the name Wilhelm. My best friend was from Dusseldorf. She was my best friend for like 36 years or something before she passed away. I mean, and then I had all these people who were coming into my life that were German. I go, why is this? They said, well, Germany's making a great contribution right now. See, because what Germany did is that they recognized what happened before and started to make corrections and owned it in a different way. But some of the others, we don't look at our history and we try to cover it up and pretend it didn't happen. That's what we were doing in the United States. If we don't look at the things that had gone on, then we won't change them. We just cover them up, and then it keeps festering. And they said, "This is where you are now." They said, "What you're going to see in your world," and They told me the United States was leading the way in this restructuring. I'm going, why? Said, well, they said they were going to create this more perfect union where there was going to be equal and free for all. Well, they haven't lived up to that. Then they started explaining, I go, well, why now? Then they started bringing in astrology, which I'd never studied again, but they said if you look, everything is energetic. So they said the planet Pluto, they kept talking about that. I go, I don't know anything about this. But it was coming through in the information because that planet, when the United States was formed, that's when that planet was moving, and then it came to this other position in 2024. Wait a minute, it completed this 248-year cycle, and that's when we start looking at a reckoning, meaning, oh, we didn't do what we said we were going to do. Are we going to do it now? Are we going to change? But no, we're not going to do that right away because we still have to go through the fighting a bit. But it will change now because it's shifting. Astrologically, it's shifting. And actually, today and tomorrow specifically are very energetic shifts that are occurring. I never understood any of this except AI started analyzing all of Wilhelm's messages and showed me that it was aligned that way. And that's why it worked for people. That's why it guided others to understanding who they are. But I was still doubting it. We will always doubt ourselves, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool to see that everything follows certain patterns and rhythms and
Mm-hmm.
even with the help of AI, it's such a help to kind of zoom out
Mm-hmm.
for us and really look at like the high level of like
Mm-hmm.
where are we, where should we go in business, in whatever it is we're doing. It's really cool to have a tool like that. I mean, it's incredible.
But we're the ones who have to program it also. That's the other thing. And that came through. I did an interview a few years ago, and I was channeling, and they asked, and AI came up, and Wilhelm says, "Well, you're the ones who are creating it. You're the humans, so you have to put in the things that you wanted to keep populating." Uh-uh. Because we're worried about it now, but that's because if we haven't moved to that higher state of consciousness within us, then we may do things that are of a lower vibrational nature and we'll program that in. But we have the opportunity to make a different choice. And that's where we are.
Mm. Yeah, I feel that. Mm. It's exciting. It's exciting to know that we have the power, you know?
Yes, and I my thing was getting they would keep saying this, yeah, it's just going to be about the belief. I couldn't believe because they started showing me they had given me all this information that was completely organized. And because no one had seen this happen before, including me, it was challenging for others to accept it. That's why I asked you about the birthday thing, your birthday, because every time when they first told me that, I said that doesn't make sense. But then I would read the message to someone and they go, "Oh, that makes sense." Now they said all the message would make sense for everyone. That's just how we work. But for the individual, it would have a different kind of resonance. I doubted that, and I wouldn't ask people, in the beginning. And then I got brave enough. I go, let me see. I went to one big meeting at this with these executives, people I would never talk about this stuff with, right? And this one billionaire and all, and I did his, and it was exactly accurate. Fortunately, he was a guy who had a little spiritual sense about himself too, so it was easy. But then I did everyone else in that room, and they were all accurate. And they said, you must understand the law of attraction is real, and you each have your energetic plans, your DNA, and your nothing. We just figure it out as we live as individuals, but also as a collective society. We discover new things, and that's what we're meant to do. But we also become afraid of that.
Mm.
A concept was this, Christian, because I said, well, why is it going to be so difficult? They gave me a message called kicking and screaming. I go, what? What does that mean? They said, when you watch the birth of a newborn and you take them out of the womb and then you smack them and then they're kicking and screaming. And so you have now taken them out of the womb where they were for 9 months, where they felt completely safe and okay. But now you throw them into the world where they don't know anything and they're afraid. And so that's exactly what you're feeling now as your world is trying to birth a new world. And many of you are kicking and screaming, trying to stay in the womb and safe.
Mm. Yeah, it's exciting, and I think it's exactly like the zeitgeist that we're currently going through, you know? A
Yes.
lot of people that you meet and talk to are just like floating along, swimming along. Of course, you have some that are kicking and screaming, but everybody is like in this limbo, feels like.
Yes.
Nobody really knows, like with AI and oh my gosh, the government shutdown, like all these like funny things happening that just like people just I mean, who cares at the end
Yeah.
of the day? But it's like it's an occasion for people to get kicking and screaming. But most people these days are just like, oh, the government shut down? I didn't even know everything still works, you know?
Well, certain people. But then there are others, and this is the part where we weren't paying attention. And this is what happens. Um, Especially in the United States, there are so many people who have, how can I say it? They have not understood their power, so to speak. And so then they subjugate themselves to leaders. And this is exactly what Wilhelm said, told us years ago would be happening, because we go through power shifts. It's not, this time we've done it before, but we're just seeing one now in front of us that people aren't paying attention to. So what they said was, when I didn't want to do channeling, I go, why would I do this? They said, well, you're going to see a world where billions of people are not going to know who they are. And so we have the information for them to come to a greater understanding. And he said they'll be fooled. They'll be fooled by the other things and people promising things instead of them developing what's within them. And so then I looked at the shutdown. I looked at all the people. I was watching. It just gets me because I was told this years ago, and then I go back. I go, wow, could I have done more? That's what I go through, a little bit of guilt there too. But anyway, we all do that to different degrees. But saw this one woman who was trying to make a choice because she had no money. She had 23 cents left, and she had kids to feed. And she goes, I don't. She's like just crying on the new. I don't know what I'm going to do because they cut off the benefits. The government cut off the billionaires cut off the benefits for the poor people. And I think who was it? Bill Gates made a comment about that years ago. He goes, wow, the richest person in the world taking away food from the poorest people. And that's what we were going to see. Because there's just an element within each of us that we need to understand our worth and value. And then others will just take advantage because they know they can. We eat, and they said, but we can't judge it. Because they said, if we're eternal spiritual beings, we've done certain things like that ourselves. And so we're meant to clean up our individual paths, because in some place in our history we've done those horrible things. But now we have an opportunity to do something different.
Mm, beautiful. Yeah, beautifully said. I think that opportunity to do things differently is every moment, you know?
Yes, and that's it. And that's the message that keeps coming through every moment. It's about
Every
doing
moment.
and yeah, we
Yeah.
just forget.
Yeah, it comes back to presence, awareness, Zen, like all these, practices that bring you back
Yes.
into the now,
Hmm.
Um, part of the reason also I started a tea brand, it's called One with Tea, right? So the
Hmm.
mission there is to bring people into a space of oneness with
Hmm.
themselves, right? Because I believe the more that people can experience the now, the presence, the
Yes.
actual moment, the less you invest energy and time in the past or the future,
Hmm.
right?
Yes. And they said, and that's what they kept giving me. They said, well, you're in the process of moving to oneness. That's what they wanted us to understand about. But it's challenging because we're not going to all want to go there, and we're not going. And so, and that's the understanding that we must have as well. And they kept saying to me, "Well, be patient. Be patient with the world as you need it to be with yourself, because we each take time to change, to accept something, and to move. And so then collectively, the world is doing the same thing."
Beautiful. What do you have to say about extraterrestrials? What is their role to play? How do we like to see them? Or, maybe even give our power away times.
Well, that's going to be what we each choose to believe, because our thoughts are the most powerful things that we have. And so even if there are extraterrestrial, we're not going to attract the ones that would be detrimental unless that were part of our plan. And it usually is not. So we just have to. But the other thing is that as humans, we become very arrogant, thinking we're the only beings in the galaxies. And that is just absolutely, that's probably not true. But they would always say, but if that's not your thing, you don't need to really study that. But the fact is to understand that your existence is what is important right now, That is it. And if you're meant to see extraterrestrials, that's great. I would do channeling session. People would come in and they would talk about that, and they said, "Well, great. Please help others understand." So if you're seeing things and you're not afraid, then it means your mission is to gain that, give that awareness to many others. We each have a different role or path that we're meant to follow.
Hmm, beautiful. Well, we're coming towards the end of the episode. We have about 5 minutes left, but I would love to, you know, talk to you, or maybe I'm not sure if you channel on podcasts or sessions as well.
Yeah.
Um, that would be amazing to bring through Wilhelm, and yeah, if that is a
Okay.
possibility,
Okay.
if you don't
Perfect.
mind.
Yes. 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 Christian, we're so pleased to be here with you, and you could not have planned this any better. Because as we said, you didn't believe us or yourself. Now, what we meant by that, you're each moving through this great evolutionary portal in your lives and your world, and you're each meant to do something more. But you get a little stuck, and so we thought we would remind you today. So it was perfect that we could come here now. You each come into the world with something within you that is meant to flourish and blossom and bloom and give you the greatest life experience you could have. But you also have the doubt. You have fear and doubt. And as we've said when we first started giving you the messages, we said you would be moving through this restructuring, and our goal was to help you move through the fear and doubt, because that is the only thing that holds you back in your lives individually, but also in your world. As you're attempting to move to this higher state or this other dimension of your world, which is the fifth dimension, as we've often spoken of, you will have some bumps in the road, and you will think that you're off track or that you're lost or that you're broken, and you are not. You're always in the process of building. You're building yourself and you're building the world, because you're each that important. And as we have always said, you are the world. Your individual life is that important, and the more of you who become willing to accept that, you will see great changes in not only in your lives, but also in your world. And we're so happy that we could bring you this information, because we love you all so very much.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Thank you for thank you for bringing that through.
Thank you. I, I hope it makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. It's again the reminder to come back into presence to
Mm,
what is really real,
mm-hmm.
you know.
Yes, great.
Roger, thank you so much for being here. Let us know where people can find you, where they can get in touch with you,
Right.
and yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Great. Yeah, the RogerBurnley.com is the website, so they can always find everything there. So,
Wonderful. All right.
great. Thank
Thank
you
you so
so
much
much.
for being here, sharing your heart, sharing your wisdom, and yeah, bringing us back to remembrance.
Great. Thank you.
All right.